database or something.
Like Google does. You mean like that? You mean you kind of look for it on the internet. You're like, oh, I've got this error. That kind of support.
Stack Overflow, Google,
that kind of support.
Any of those.
No, I think that's family procedures, but Hello, welcome to Cloud Unplugged. This is season 2, episode 6. I'm Jon Shanks.
I'm Jay Keshur.
And I think we're going to talk about squads, chapters, agile, delivery teams, platforms, all of the things.
Everything that you could talk about.
Everything we can talk about. But I know this kind of comes up. I think there's quite a few companies we speak to who have adopted different models of different delivery kind of methodologies. Then there's a kind of ops models, which I think we kind of brushed on but didn't really specifically talk about. But there's obviously cloud operating models and all these other things, and they're kind of slightly
They're not really
different.
the same thing, are they? Right?
Yeah.
So obviously the cloud, an operating model is kind of how you organize and deliver. I guess they tried to solve. They solved the same. They tried to solve the same problem, but come at it in two different ways. So the kind of the way that people are organized and creating silos and creating kind of cross-functional teams is the chapter, squad, whatever model that Spotify have coined and decided to make up some new words around.
Yeah.
But obviously that's been around for ages, right? Because Scrum has been around for ages.
Yeah.
Lean ways of working has been around. But operating models is, I guess, a little bit more prescriptive around delivering on something or with something. Does that make sense?
No.
Okay. Brilliant.
I mean, I would say it's pretty much synonymous a little bit. I think obviously the cloud looks at it through the cloud lens.
Yeah, of course.
The business is looking at it through like productivity. And so on one hand, you kind of have squads and things, tribes, all the way they've organized Scrum and Agile. Well, it could be Scrum, Kanban, but anyways, like Agile methodologies of like, we've got to deliver business applications quickly. What's the most effective way as we scale to not end up in a bureaucratic, red taped process, slowing down delivery? So kind of based on autonomy. The other flip side is kind of similar-ish, but from an architectural perspective around the cloud, and then like different setups around it, and then obviously it takes into account like financials and
exactly.
It's slightly different, but there'll be financials involved even in the squads. It's just that they're not talking about it. It's not like it's not there, it's just not mentioned. That's all. I imagine.
I guess within a Scrum, you're not really managing finances. Like
no.
there's you're doing that outside of a squad or whatever, right?
Yeah, so, exactly. That's outside of the teams, but budgets.
Whereas with like an op model or something like that, it's kind of you're solving that within the within an op model. Like, are you cross charging? Are you centrally, taking all of that? So I guess maybe an op model is more prescriptive and more has a lot more to it than just how the team is going to manage itself, or what the thing is above those teams, or how cross-functional disciplines are going to evolve. So an op model is almost how the organization functions, and then squads, teams, etc. are how projects deliver within the organization.
Yeah, I still don't know. Again, cloud's got their operating model.
Cloud's got their operating model.
Sorry, I'm just thinking about how to articulate what I'm trying to say. My brain's a bit slow this morning. So the cloud's come up with an operating model. Spotify's got a way of organizing its teams, which is an operating model. However you look at it, it's a way of operating, right? Yeah. So the thing that's missing from all this is the effectiveness of both. So it's like, we can all come up with models. It's just like, we could just throw models out there until like we're blue in the face, but it's what the measurement of success is with the models and what they're trying to do. Is it efficiency? Is it productivity? Is it about control? Is it about security? So it's about all of those things. And I guess sounds like Spotify. I mean, I don't know how many people know about the
Should we
Spotify model.
describe it?
Are you asking me to describe it, or are you just saying
someone just should describe
someone
in this room should describe this stuff? Yeah.
Can somebody go out there and describe this stuff so we can talk about it properly, please? No, so there's obviously chapters, tribes, squads, guilds, I think is probably the most primary thing.
Yeah.
A squad, I mean, for me, it's semantics, but obviously I'm sure there'll be some people. I mean, maybe Spotify can just say that I'm talking nonsense and it isn't semantics, but a delivery team, which is usually multidisciplinary anyway, they call a squad.
An agile delivery team.
An agile delivery team, exactly. They call that a squad made up of like different skills. Those skills that we'd normally call a function, they call a chapter. And then because obviously they're part of like different chapters means different kind of skills. Then they have a tribe, which is all of those things together, which we call a business unit, I guess in more enterprise stuff.
Yeah.
And then they have guilds, which is obviously people with the same interests that can kind of get together, share best practices, etc., which you could call a center of excellence, right?
Exactly.
Very similar concept. So I don't think any of these are necessarily new, but it sounds like they're kind of new, forward thinking. But they've obviously chosen. I'm talking a lot here. I've kind of realised, but they've obviously chosen autonomy and speed over maybe standards and best practices. And consistency from what I understand, because they don't enforce things necessarily.
It's funny though, right? You just said autonomy and speed, but if you're optimizing for speed, then you probably would want to have standards and best practices and kind of level, understand a kind of base or foundational way of working. Otherwise, you've got loads of people just going off and delivering and doing maybe reinventing the wheel every time.
Yeah. I think they solved one problem and introduced others, maybe. You know what I mean? Because it's like the Dunbar's law, which
Dunbar's number.
Dunbar's number 150, 100, is it?
150.
100 to 150, isn't it?
Yeah.
So or maybe they've thought that through and thought, oh no, traditional enterprises, we don't want to end up like that, right? Because they're not very efficient, not very effective. And then the more middle management you end up with, the slower things become. So there's probably maybe just like, actually, we don't want to repeat that. So what we're going to do is this. But then obviously that introduces different problems. Yeah. So I guess I don't know if this is true. I'm just totally guessing. I even work for Spotify, I'm sure. But that's what it feels like to me, that they were kind of replacing one set of problems with another. And you're right. Like, what about surely the speed of which somebody joins the team and they're effective is equally as important.
Exactly that, right? I mean, the quality of what they're delivering, the time that it takes for them to even be productive, for them to understand, I guess, for them to figure out what the difference is in all of the different names, because now you've decided to use words that aren't necessarily
mainstream.
Yeah, mainstream. So there's like a bit of a cognitive load on what it is to function in the organization, if you're Spotify or you're using that model. So it's a bit odd, but I can kind of
cooler.
See it does sound cool, right?
Although way cooler than business unit,
a guild,
exactly.
I mean, I don't want to be in a guild.
Yeah, but you're in a chapter.
Maybe
it's a page turner.
Yeah,
page turner. You don't know what's coming next.
I'm definitely in a tribe. I'm in a tribe of one. Yeah,
squads. It sounds like you're going to war when you come to work.
Or play football. I don't know.
Yeah, or play football. But yeah, I think it just sounded better.
Yeah, exactly.
That's our conclusion. Nothing to do with
cool. End of episode. That's it.
Nothing to do with productivity at all. Just sounded cool. That was the motivator. Yeah. Anyway, I suppose you're right. I don't know, because obviously Backstage got built, so I don't know where that specifically stemmed from. I know of it, obviously, but I don't know the origins exactly, other than its Spotify origins. And now it's a thing that teams use under the guise of being autonomous. Whether that was built from a squad or within a chapter, I don't know. I'm guessing probably if they didn't have,
or within a tribe,
because I'm guessing they wouldn't have had any of that central platform team capability per se, because they weren't organized in that way. So presumably it was done within a chapter. I guess
with most things, I'm not. This is a bit of a generalization, so let me correct myself before I make it. Some things they get built almost by accident, right? As a byproduct of needing to do something, and then seeing the value of the thing, other teams seeing the value of what they've built, and then you get more users of that thing. There's no real intention behind it, other than to solve a problem for a single team. But because now you've shared your ideas and other people have kind of seen that exists, you now have a bunch of users and a bunch of demands. So now you're almost having to solve different problems that you didn't necessarily think of. I'm not assuming that that's how Backstage started, but I'm just saying in terms of, internally built tools, that does tend to happen.
Yeah.
A fair amount.
I don't know how. Yeah, I don't know enough about how it worked, but I guess like the path of least resistance is usually what people take. So if someone's done something and it seems to be working, I don't really know though, because I mean, surely humanistically they get competitive elements within the business too, right? Because human beings are human beings.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, egos are egos.
Yeah. So
whether people refuse to use Backstage because they didn't invent it in their chapter, does that happen? I don't know. I mean,
and to front stage,
much quicker. Front stage, I'm much faster. Yeah,
I love using front stage.
Yeah, really front stage is a much better solution. Exactly. I prefer it to Backstage, to be honest. But yeah, no, I'm presuming. I guess if it's got adoption, but there'll be all those humanistic issues, won't there, with that kind of competitive nature inside of it.
It's good though. I think competition drives creativity and
definitely, yeah.
Without having competition, then what have you got?
Boring.
Yeah, it's boring. Exactly. Yeah. And you're not really pushing yourself, or you don't have external factors sort of pushing you to excel. You kind of.
It's definitely good for innovation. Like if you're being competitive, it helps innovate.
100%.
Not sure whether it's great to have from a cost perspective, as a business, to have that cost within the company. Like,
just want to compete against Team A. Oh, okay, yeah, sure. You can go off and do that. Solve the same wheel. Problem. Yeah, exactly.
Reinvent another wheel. That's fine by me. It's
just another £1.5 million a year. That's totally fine.
Yeah, exactly. I wonder if then the whether they now have a central Backstage team. Do they have that now?
From what I understand, they do. And I think they I guess in terms of like technology, they're operating in slightly different areas. So like, you might have a squad around a function in Spotify, let's say a menu or something like that. But then you might have squads or tribes around a central function like compute or networking or Backstage or something like that. So it's, you can have alignment to technology, like base technology, instead of just delivering a feature or a function, if that makes sense.
Yeah, bit old school though, those types of things, like network. I mean, now it's software defined. I mean, everything's kind of become software defined pretty much.
Yeah,
but it's kind of a bit old school to have.
It is.
My theory is like, I mean, you still need the knowledge of networks, I suppose. I mean, that's got to be a given. You need to understand what a network is and how routing works and all that kind of stuff.
And if you kind of have a bunch of people that specialize in that, how are you going to organize them? Because they're obviously going to solve the problem. Like you at some stage you are going to centralize on some capability. Like you don't have finance people in every single team, right? It just wouldn't scale. It doesn't make sense. So you always centralize the things where it makes sense to, and then the reason that you have multidisciplinary teams is obviously to reduce friction getting resources from other teams aligned in that capability. So I'm not sure if you would necessarily have the amount of work necessary to have a single networking person in your team. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
Especially
the
now
demand
that things
is
are
not there, you mean.
exactly the demand is
Unless you're
not
just
there.
hitting loads of networking issues every day.
Yeah,
And you needed that person, or you're designing something that's basically about networking because it's a networking product. Then it probably would justify somebody.
Then probably a whole team is going to have those skills.
Yeah.
So, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, cloud's kind of removed networking primarily to a point. If you just were in the cloud, you didn't have any on-prem at all ever, and no custom specific networks and things like that. You went all VPN'd up and data centers and all that stuff, and you were born in the cloud. You probably wouldn't need a networking team per se, really. To be fair, I wouldn't imagine.
You're right, but we probably take this stuff for granted because we've come from an area that has evolved with the capabilities of cloud and software-defined networks and all that kind of stuff. But if you are just to say a software engineer and all you've done is hands on keyboard writing code, and you've not necessarily had to deal with infrastructure and networks and things like that, and now you have to learn all of those basics and principles, then obviously there's ways and tools.
Do you have to learn those things?
Good question. Do you have to learn those things?
If it's just done for you,
if it's done for you, great. Yeah.
Why do you need to learn it?
Probably don't. But the change that's happening now, and we've talked about it on previous episodes, is more of the kind of responsibility is being pushed down to developers, right? In terms of what they have to know and learn. And some of those things are taken away by services, like you said, cloud services or services that people can offer around them. But if you've got like a problem to solve because you've seen some network latency, then you're just going to spend a lot of time. Like that might be a central function that helps you with that. Or just like Google, or a database or something.
Like Google does. You mean like that? You kind of look for it on the internet. It's like, oh, I've got this error. That kind of support.
Stack Overflow, exactly. Google,
kind of support
any of those.
No, I guess that's fine. I'm being facetious, but I don't know. I guess shifting. We spoke about that before, though, like shifting responsibilities, and we're getting a bit off topic, but we spoke about obviously shifting the responsibilities to developers, but not at the expense of them having to spend forever doing all of the courses to learn a thing, and getting all those skills. I think not like there's anything wrong with obviously learning, but not where it's hampering your delivery, because you were there for a reason to come in to begin with a skill set, and that skill set was the thing the business decided they needed to kind of help deliver. Expanding that skill set's fine, but really if that's in conflict for speed of delivery, which is maybe what the business wants, faster functionality
and cost
and reduced cost. Yeah, you want to do it cheaper, obviously faster, more secure. I mean, all the time, all the same things. But if it doesn't help in those objectives, then I guess it becomes a bit questionable whether it's working well. So then how you're shifting becomes the important thing, because if it requires loads of upskilling, then it's
how
not
and
great.
what you're shifting.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a great rule of thumb just to shift stuff for the sake of it.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, anyway, squads, platforms, and captains is what we're supposed to be talking about, which I think we concluded isn't that different to
it's just
original ways. But
lean ways of working.
It's just lean ways of working,
and then a structure on top of individual teams to, like business units, like you were saying, to manage the overall outcome of what that business or unit is trying to achieve, right? It's like, it's not rocket science.
No, but it's been interesting. I think the bit I find kind of interesting is the fact that there was obviously still problems, because to produce software, to make it simpler for developers to deliver application business logic, right, which is what Backstage was there to do, the speed and the process and the consistency on doing that, like having the things there ready to go so actually you can be a bit more effective without having to learn loads and abstracting some complexity away as much as possible, is kind of what platforms are about. Is remove the complexity, make the experience better around the technology. So it obviously must have introduced, if you to rewind it and say, well, what was happening before that existed? Like what was the overheads on reinvention, how much duplication was going on, how quickly were people being effective when they joined those teams, Was it consistent? If you joined Team X or Squad X,
Exactly.
were you as quick as joining Squad Y? Because obviously you're in different kind of tribes, even potentially, right? So it could be
different onboarding experiences. Like, so maybe someone joining the company wouldn't necessarily have the same experience because you have completely autonomous teams potentially, right? So now I guess the way that I see it is there's a lot of risk in there for the business to have to
randomized things.
Yeah, exactly. But I guess we don't know the ins and outs of how much autonomy those teams, and whether they're giving them like a kind of guardrails to be autonomous within, or if we're just saying, actually just go off and do whatever you want, here's a bunch of money, go hire a bunch of people, just create your own company.
I suppose it's hard to know though, if when you do autonomize, you then can't necessarily see all the problems as well, right? So you then how you're measuring becomes quite imperative, because then if you're whether they care, maybe they just don't care and we're overcomplicating it and just like, do you know what, we've got loads of money, we just don't care anyway, we don't need to be like the cost efficiencies of like trying to be that micromanagement mentality of trying to see everything versus just get on with it. It's hard to weigh up the opportunity cost versus like the cost of actually reinvention and duplication and problems that could be in those. I'm not sure efficiencies, I guess.
Because I mean, then you're just talking about people and how good at managing they are, almost, right?
No. I'm just saying though, if you're autonomous, to see the ins and outs of each team, to then understand overall whether there's some duplication, I guess. Whether that's
what tribes exist for.
No, that's what the guilds of common interest would exist. The tribes then end up being
multiple squads.
Well, it's chapters and squads in a tiers. It's like a business unit.
Yeah.
So for you to say, how can I see whether there's the same issues in many places going on?
Yeah,
it becomes a bit harder when you've like, you're in a chapter.
Yeah.
And you're now in a squad, but you're also in a tribe within that squad. I.e., you're an engineer in a team who's in a business unit. Who's got oversight whether some of the problems are like replicated in lots of different places and how inefficient that is in aggregate? Because you could be like, well, actually, that's really inefficient. It's cost us loads of money, this going on in a business.
Yeah.
We should do something about it, to then set up an initiative to actually solve the problem. The hope is that, which is maybe what's happened, that somebody does solve that problem because somebody sees it somewhere, and then it becomes a pattern for the rest of the business.
Exactly.
Fingers crossed, but it's not deliberate then. It's not intentional. You're not set up to do that.
And I guess, those patterns, are they then, do people kind of enforce that those patterns are used, or do they still have autonomy?
I don't know. I think I read somewhere saying that they don't really have massive standards, and that they... I don't know. I mean, again, we just need Spotify to come on and correct everything we're saying.
So if you work at Spotify, come and speak to Jay and Jon.
Somebody please from Spotify come on and just tell us we're wrong. And actually all the things we've said are completely incorrect.
Yeah.
It doesn't work anything like what we've just said. But yeah, I think, I don't know. I just feel that when they started and where the world is now in terms of technology and functionality and cloud maturity and all these other things, that you probably wouldn't choose to operate like that now, I don't think, because you can standardize on stuff easily. You can build repeatable ways of working around teams. You don't need... There is some element that you could create. You could have had a backstage now, right? They've created something. Yeah. Or there's loads of other solutions out there, not just backstage. So why not just use that?
Yeah.
Why go off and be like, we'll see where we end up again and go on the same journey ourselves? It's like, well, don't do that. Like, why would you? Like, they've just done, like, loads of companies just done that. I guess it doesn't make too much sense to me when you've watched a company go through it and now can see that in the end they had to go and do this anyway.
Yeah.
So then you're like, well, should we just not go through the same journey as other companies?
I guess you're starting to talk about how to deliver software quickly on cloud or even public
anywhere.
cloud. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that is exactly that sort of DevOps / platform engineering type world that we talk about so much. It feels like its own topic. In that we could probably talk
What's
about
the topic, Jay?
pros and cons of building a platform internally versus going out and using something that already exists, like Backstage, like anything else.
Yeah.
So it feels like we should probably
do a separate one.
Do a separate one on that. Yeah.
Do you go on the journey for the business and work out all the requirements and see if it's, quote, snowflaked, a snowflake business where it's so unique that you can't reuse anything.
Exactly.
Or you can reuse things, but you just have to still stitch them all together, whatever those independent things are.
Yeah.
Versus someone's probably got maybe 90% there with something, so that you don't have to go and do that 90%, and you can just add 10% of whatever it is.
Yeah, if you need to.
If you even need to, yeah.
I mean, how do you even know the things that you need to do until you've got a baseline? Like the cost of understanding what that 10% is that you might need to solve is, it implies that you even know what it could mean, right? So
do you think, though, philosophically, sorry to interrupt, but do you think this is a real philosophical thing? So I just need to word it in a way that makes sense, because I'm just coming out with it. But do you think because the industry's changing, the perception is that it's different, but actually it isn't? Like we've just done, like squads, agile, all these other things, right?
Are they
It
just making up
sounds
new
like
terms
it's different. It sounds like it's different. It sounds like, oh my god, a chapter and a tribe and a squad and all this other stuff. And you think, yeah, but isn't that kind of semantics?
Yeah.
Like, couldn't you just rename those things to be other things? Like that's now that's actually a business unit. That's really called a delivery team. Like, you could map them to other terms. There's probably slight nuance, but the same with technologies like containers, Kubernetes, cloud, AI, ML, GitOps, FinOps, DevSecOps, blah, 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 right? All these things sound like everything's altering. So it almost feels like you need to start again. Like, oh, we better start again and think this through again because it's all changed. And you're like, I don't know if it has all changed necessarily, just different principles. Maybe, I don't know.
It's so funny you talk about this. I was watching, it's slight off topic, but I was watching a one of those Netflix explained shows, and this one was on flags, and there is a link here, so let me bring this back. Bear with me. Obviously, one of the things that people love getting behind is this idea of this symbol that represents them,
right?
And that's almost the same thing here, right? So, hey, Spotify, I'm going to use a different term and squads. Boom, you've now got a bunch of people that have aligned in some way, even if it's just the way that they're sort of referring to themselves. And that creates something like there is a something that doesn't necessarily get measured in the same way, but it does create some cohesiveness and sense of direction. So it's, I think that needs to exist in some way, but it would be nice if that thing was just, you're aligning in terms of what the business is trying to do and the problem that the business is trying to solve, rather than like creating little pockets of weird alignment with creating new terms and making it more complicated or harder.
But do you think, though, because the terms are new, that the behaviors that get created feels like, because it's hard, because unless and we're privileged in some ways because we follow it a lot and we're passionate about what we do as jobs, so we're invested heavily in like understanding things. But at the same time, if you're more doing day to day, or maybe you worked at certain companies that wasn't as cutting edge potentially in the industry or in the market, and then you hear all these terms, that it sounds quite confusing. So then you feel like you have to go and reinvent in some ways, so that your next job, you might be like, oh, right, okay, well, the business has said we need to modernize. Now we need to build things again in a different way, but now we're going to learn it. And you might not, I guess, reuse things that exist because you're trying to figure it out.
Right.
And so then it becomes the process of figuring it out lends you to then probably create something from scratch that probably ends up the same as maybe some existing thing that was already there, because you end up going on the same journey internally without being even aware as other people, where they're all figuring out. Each time you're figuring it out, you probably end up slight variations of the same thing, because you're like, how do we deliver software now with all these principles? How do we do you see what I mean? Then you're like, oh, well, we probably should abstract some of this complexity away. We've always, do you know what I mean? Then you're like, I'm sure this has
Just
happened already before.
Yeah, exactly.
There are other people who have just done this.
So to summarize, what you're saying is, because now there's so many different terms that exist, and let's say you're someone that's not necessarily been in and around these terms, or working in a business, and you've been a bit sheltered from that. Let's say you're going for a new job. Or
maybe the company new leader, right? A new leader comes in and they're like, we're going to do this, right? And a new senior leader comes in, and they're all like inspired to like help the business, and the conceit needs transforming. And then you're like, what are all these things?
Exactly.
And you're like, oh my God, head spin.
So then because you've now got a bunch of new things to learn, and you're now having to go on a journey. You're learning by doing, and creating,
which is the best way to learn. Funnily,
100%.
Learning by doing is the best way to learn, because you learn through failures and get things wrong. That's
personally, yes, it's great to do it
personally,
that way.
I'm saying,
but for the
not
business,
for the business,
is it?
No,
no, probably not.
Not always. I mean, if you're first to solve those problems, obviously fine. But if you can get to your destination faster by reusing other people's effort, I mean,
standing on the shoulders of giants, right? That's what we do all the time. Like, we don't want to solve like physical infrastructure and networking.
We're lazy, Jay.
Yeah, exactly.
We're lazy people. We don't want to have to think for ourselves.
but like the effort, like just you're driving a car in a park. You're not gonna, or you're going off road. You don't want to build a bloody road just to get to where you're going, right? It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So so exactly.
So I guess what are we saying then? So I think what we're concluding here is there's obviously clearly a need for software delivery to be looked at in terms of a technology capability back to teams, or back to squads, back to tribes, back to business units, back to projects, because as we were talking about before, the 4 metrics of like, mean time to recovery, deployment frequency, etc., DevOps ones, one of them should also be how fast is a developer effective, how quickly are they onboarded, how quickly can they understand the business delivery mechanism for their software delivery.
Well, the way that I kind of see it is, in any organization there are 2 types of teams. Teams that are building functions for the business, which is assumed to be external, outside. They're solving a problem for outside of the business, something that they can solve. But there also needs to be teams that are making it easy for those teams, the ones that are offering the business value, to function. So finance, HR. Maybe a center of excellence, a cloud platform, or platform engineering, whatever. But if you think of it in those 2 different lights, then you can start kind of aligning on what those centralized functions, the ones that are just trying to solve those internal problems, should be. And whether there is a pattern for them. I mean, there already is a pattern for them, right? So every single company will have someone that does finance, or something, a function, something that is legal, something that is HR, so it's in software delivery. What are those? Are there any other functions that we can start aligning on to make that easier?
But these are, I guess, they're not necessarily functions. We're talking about is technologies already have some like standard, like clouds have APIs, right? A thing already. How you can organize delivery around those things in a more streamlined and efficient way, because it's become easier in some ways to probably commoditize these things. We don't have to. It doesn't need to be totally tools and process and people all the way down, right? So it doesn't scale unless you're scaling the people with the tools. It doesn't have to be that way. But it is very much that industry still a bit. And then there are companies, I guess like the Spotify. I think Monzo did the platform, didn't they? And Airbnb have. And
funny you say Monzo did the platform. I think after they went on their journey, what,
They were
3,
like,
4 years, they were like,
we'd buy one next time.
100%.
Yeah.
There's no way that we want to do that journey again.
I suppose though, once you've learnt it all, you realise, like, I mean, that's what we're just saying.
Yeah.
You're gonna go on a journey thinking, because maybe there was already something that existed that would have got them there already, even when they started. Right? Maybe there was something more beneficial to them in the end than reinventing or recreating another platform. But
I think if you think like what we've, the conclusion that we've come to, that we could probably agree on is, if you're, doing it for yourself, like that learning journey is great. There's not that many things that can give you the same amount of knowledge and the depth of knowledge. However, for the business, it almost always makes sense to look at something or someone that specializes in that field to solve that problem, unless, like you said, you're a snowflake or so unique in that your problems can't be solved or haven't been solved in the industry.
Do you think, I mean, we won't go on too much about this, but do you think many people can map technology to business
no, that's
problems?
I mean, it's going to sound slightly biased because we are in and around this, right? So if you're asking me how many people I have been and seen that can take technology and business and figure out the relationship between the two in a way that aligns the business properly, aligns to the direction of the business properly. My assumption and my experience is that it's
small percentile.
It's very small percentage. Yeah, very small percentage of people can think of it in the way, and I'm sure those people probably think that, oh yeah, no, I'm totally aligned to the business. I'm delivering business value, but you know from their actions and how they're doing the things that they're doing, or maybe they're there's a capability issue, but it's just not there. I don't think it's as high as it should be. How about you? What do you reckon?
Well, I guess I kind of agree, because I think if you're really into tech, you might you only can conceptualize what you know. Yeah, what you know and what you're seeing as the problems. So I guess if you've got a lot of other senior managers above you and other things, you might not really know what the real business challenges are. So you could be totally isolated from that. So you're just looking at, right, oh well, I'm in a project or whatever and I'm delivering fine and that's great, and I don't see another project and I can't quite tally whether, oh, I've just done the same thing as you, and like, oh, you've done it slightly differently to me, and oh, what does this all mean on aggregate then? Does that mean we've all done it? Because there's 40 projects here, and does that mean we've all got a slight variation of the same? Is that risky for the business then, having all this variety in the company? So, I think it to take a certain mindset to probably start zooming out to then holistically look at it all and be like, this isn't necessarily right for the business. And CTOs can be quite detached from that, obviously, because they're not seeing that. And then they see it with a different lens, right?
They see it in a different way. You cannot expect everyone to see
all the things.
All of the things
no, I agree,
at the same time. That's just not possible.
But that's what I was explaining with the tribes thing.
Yeah,
is like you can't see all the problems when you start to autonomize.
But no one can, is the point. Like, in what structure do you think that you can see all of the problems, or enough where you feel comfortable that you can head down on a direction?
Well, you don't necessarily need to. I think I guess it's a bit like history. Like, there are patterns. The humanistic patterns that go on repeatedly, round and round and round. Things don't change that much.
Of course, yeah, sure.
So I think it's more around the experience and looking for the patterns and being like, there's a high probability humanistically when we set up a company and we do these things that we're going to end up falling into the same patterns as this company and that company and this other company, right? So what can we learn from other companies that have kind of gone on these journeys repeatedly so that we don't waste the same energy and cost on basically going through the same process, because we'll probably end up landing in roughly the same way, just slightly differently, probably. Maybe some extra learnings, maybe there was something slightly unique, but not enough. So I suppose it's not necessarily about, like, there's probably enough information out there and enough scale in the industry to learn enough from it to probably set a good strategy to then prevent needing to kind of go on those journeys, or to at least be able to predict roughly.
But strategy and execution are so different. So you might have a great strategy, but then because of the people and the capability of, or the way that your organization has, you know, the culture that it has or whatever, the execution of that strategy might be really bad, right? You know, you, like, all managers aren't the same. They don't have the same capability.
Oh yeah, no, totally agree with that. You're never going to fix problems.
Exactly.
I'm not saying that as in that you're not like removing all problems just because. I mean, that's the thing. It's not that it's error free.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that, but what I am saying though is that you have a choice of whether you want to just find the difference between you and the companies, and then, you know, the delta.
Yeah, just work on the delta.
On the delta, or whether you just want to go on exactly the same journey as loads of others. And
depends if you've got loads of money. You've got loads of money and
people
time.
People just don't care about money and time. Yeah, I suppose that's the other thing. But I can't even remember what we got to. Got on all this stuff. I mean, I guess. It was behavioural.
Mostly you've been talking for a while, so
I really felt like I was actually listening quite well to that. But yeah, no, I think, okay, so we've spoken about the team structures. I think we're concluding that it makes sense to put some structures around teams. It makes sense to learn from other businesses. It makes sense to investigate how other businesses have already delivered, what the patterns were there, maybe what software they produced. Maybe there's a lot of learnings out in the industry. There's a lot of good products out in the industry that get you the majority of the way there, so you don't have to go on those repeatable journeys. And then it sounds like there's a whole episode that you are going to chair. Is that what you're saying on like platform building, I guess? And is that what you're saying?
Sort of building internal tools and functions versus going out and buying them. So that could be anything from, say, cloud platforms, finance, you know, anything. So if you are one of those teams that I talked about, where you're kind of taking or helping the people that are actually delivering the business value, then what does that look like? What are the things that you should consider? What are the pros and cons of, you know, reinventing the wheel versus going out and procuring something that solves 90% of those problems?
Okay, so let's do that in the next episode then.
Done.
All right, cool. All right, well, stay tuned when Jay's going to talk about...
just me on my own.
Just Jay, yeah, because if it's Jay speaking, I'm not turning up. I'm joking. So Jay will be talking about building versus buying. Versus consuming or buying or whatever. Yeah,
internal
cool.
problems.
All right, stay tuned and we shall speak to you soon.
Thanks for listening. Bye.